So it's great to be here with George Galloway, politician and broadcaster. Hi, George.
Hi there. I'm a football fan.
And football fan, that's an important one, isn't it? And I really appreciate you taking the time to join us, because I know how busy you are just now with the election. And, you know, as we were talking just before we came on the air there, is how important do you think football is to a country like Scotland for the social fabric, etc.?
Well, I can only say that it once was of such profound importance that when Bill Shankly said football wasn't a matter of life or death, it was much more important than that. Those words could only have come from a Scotsman of his vintage and from his background. Whether or not it's still as important, I think remains to be seen. I can't speak for Scottish football in any way. I've only been back in the country for the best part now of 9 months, and there's been no football, no meaningful football, no fans, and so on. All I can say is, for me, it has been of fundamental importance. It may be the last word on my lips, it may be the last thought in my mind, and I'm glad to say that my 3 sons have exactly the same attitude. And not only are they as football crazy as me, they are much better players than me. And you may one day see them in a stadium with my name across the back. I hope so. The indications are that football isn't as important as it was, and I don't really know the reason for that. I know that in the housing scheme in which I grew up, every street, no parks then, every street was filled with people playing football in the dark, in the dark. Until your mother dragged you in, you would be out playing football in the hard, cold streets. I don't myself see that so much now, which would indicate a dip in the central importance of football to Scottish life. But the reason for that, I really don't know.
Yeah, it is fascinating, and that whole thing about street football, which I'm sure you know a lot of people listening did. And I once seen a film on Maradona, and he spoke exactly about what you were speaking about, how he would deliberately go out when the dark was going on, so he couldn't see the ball as much and work on his touch, and then come back in. I'm sure we weren't as sophisticated as that, but it helps your touch and doesn't it? And you just thought shadows and all that as well. And
yes, the dark and of course the quality of ball. Maradona used to train with a tennis ball, and if you can work your magic with a tennis ball, then a football is very much easier. I'm not sure I see so much of that, even in my own kids, by the way, who all want to be professional footballers. I don't see the level of dedication that Maradona showed in them. I hope it will come.
Yeah, it is a fascinating area. A lot of the guys I speak with and work with, the majority of the I'll speak, guys that are in their 30s or their late 20s, they'll all speak about playing with their mates. Everyone will speak about, playing Kirby or 20-a-side. And especially what I think is relevant was they would all speak about playing with their brothers or boys that are older than you, and you learn actually to be streetwise or go up the pecking order. Do you think we miss that sort of street football now then, George?
I think so. It would be fine if everyone was on the AstroTurf instead. I'm not fetishizing the value of being brought down on a cold, hard road. It's sore, as well the cinder pitches and so on. But I don't think the investment's been made in in football facilities for younger kids. And of course, there is always the lure of other things. Most people who've got kids watching this will know the lure of the iPad, the lure of the phone even, the lure of watching rather than doing for young people. That's a fairly fundamental problem, I think, that we have got. I sometimes catch some of my sons wanting to play football on the computer screen when the garden out there is just waiting for them and much more important. So I think I think Scottish football in particular, though I'm not an expert on it, I say that candidly. Scottish football has a serious problem. That the number of great Scottish players that are emerging from our country appears to have all but dried up. You would only say, I would only say, it's maybe controversial, that Andy Robertson and Scott McTominay were really top flight players, which makes Scotland's achievement in finally getting to a tournament the more creditable, because it's done without any real big stars. You're talking to someone who followed Scotland to the World Cup in 1974, which was the greatest Scottish international team we've ever had, and contained not 2, but 10 top flight stars in the side. So we need to work out. If somebody gave me the job of working out what went wrong, I'd start from that. I'd use that metric. I'd say in 1974 in Frankfurt, we had this team, and then we had a different team.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I recently watched the Dennis Law, the Lawman documentary, and he speaks about that at the end. It was great. And do you think, George, it's kind of slightly moving off football, but it's connected. Do you think Scotland as a society has changed fundamentally, say, since 1974?
Well, there's been a deproletarianization of the country. This is quite an important fact. The working class, whilst of course remaining entirely in existence, has had its centrality in Scottish life dramatically reduced. Let's go back to 1974. In 1974, when I went off to Frankfurt, I gave up my job in one factory in order to follow the team, knowing that I'd get another job in another factory when I came back. Now there are no factories either to leave or to rejoin, or precious few of them. We had coal mines, we had steelworks, we had shipbuilding, we had motor car manufacturer, truck manufacturer, we had motorbike manufacturer, we had an aluminium smelter, we had all the things that made for an industrial working class. And their sons, daughters didn't really play as much then as they increasingly do, but their sons all loved football and all played football. So that is a pretty dramatic change. Parkhead Forge is now a shopping mall. Once it was a workplace of 30,000 people. So the change in class composition and the way that the working class now lives is of course different. If you have a tight and clearly definable, like an elephant in the room, working class, then working class mores will be inculcated into each and every one and to their children. But if the working class is atomized, if half of it is sitting at home on benefits and so on, this has to have its impact on other aspects of cultural life.
Yeah, I agree. I find it fascinating that, and you mentioned one of them earlier on, the great trio, and then I suppose Sir Alex Ferguson would have been the fourth one, would be Busby, Shankly and Steen, who, coming from the mines and the shipyards, and with that industrial, as you said, mores and values, and how they took that into football clubs. And I suppose Matt Busby, I watched recently the Matt Busby documentary, and how instrumental he was in building that club up after the Second World War. Quite stunning, really.
Yeah, I mean, where are they now?
Yeah.
And I would add Sir Alex Ferguson to that mix, and therefore there is 4 absolute giants.
Yeah.
I mean, mega political and cultural figures, all of them working class, all of them socialists, all of them trade unionists, all of them identifying with and becoming heroes for the working class. A working class hero is something to be, as John Lennon said.
And it's interesting, isn't it, when you're saying that?
Where are they now?
Where are they now?
Done quite well this year, but that's it.
So I suppose
where are they now? Where is the production line that produced, Billy Bremner and his team in '74? Where is that? And where is the production line that produced these 4 Titanic managers? Why, if somebody gave me the job to conduct an inquiry on it, these are the 2 metrics with which I'd start. That was our high point in footballing terms in 1974, and those 4 were our high point in management. How did we get from there to where we are now?
Do you still go to watch football now, George? Is it Queen of the South you'll be closest to just now? Is it?
No, I do still go in normal times, of course, but mainly to Old Trafford. My sons have a close interest and association with Manchester United. I've supported Manchester United since I was 9 years old, when Dennis Law signed for United, and my late father told me that was it. We were now United supporters.
Brilliant.
The Scottish ground I'm not closest geographically to, but closest to in other regards would be Hamilton Academical.
Okay.
Their owner is a good friend of mine, and I'm looking forward, when things get back to normal, to taking in a few of those games. But no, I'd be most often found at Old Trafford.
And it's funny you mentioned Hamilton, isn't it? Because I know Brian, Rice at Hamilton, and they've got a great tradition, and Martin before him. They've got a great tradition of doing what you were speaking about earlier, taking young boys from the areas around Hamilton and actually giving them a route to the first team. Do you think that's important for young players, getting that route to the first team?
Very much so. I mean, my youngest boy guested at the weekend for his former English team in London, Hanwell Town, affiliated to clubs like Luton and so on. And he got an absolute drubbing. I mean, an embarrassing drubbing, embarrassing for me, standing on the sidelines. And I've spent the last 48 hours having to pick him up. It's, young boys' psychology is fragile. And this is a boy that went in the last 48 hours from not just wanting to, but believing he would one day turn out for Manchester United, to maybe chucking the game altogether. Now, what they do in Hamilton, Accies, is work on that psychology. Give boys a sense of belief. Give boys the route to achievement. If my son was offered a place at Chelsea, for example? I'd say no, because too many young players are wasted there. They become just chaff in a way. They become collateral damage. I'd rather my sons went to a place where they had a more realistic chance of getting promoted and breaking through and being trusted with the job. And I think Hamilton Accies do that. It's I believe that Hamilton Academicals, as the name suggests, is the thinking man's club and women's club nowadays.
It's and it's amazing how, because of that European Super League, debacle last week, isn't it? It's amazing how people are now over the last week even reverting back to the origins of the football club. Like Arsenal Woolwich and all that kind of working class 19th century. The guys coming out of the factory to use their leisure time to play football. People are starting to remember that a little bit more, aren't they?
Well, I must say that in the 48 hours in which the Super League was born and died, I never heard the words working class on the mainstream media more often in my whole life. I would hear it on the radio, I'd hear it on the television. People would talk about the working class origin. What about the working class fan? How is the working class going to still identify with football when not just Haaland, but many players are going to be picking up £1 million a week and so on. And equally, never did I hear, but for that 48 hours, a larger number of people talking about the unacceptable face of capitalism. Talking about how greed is not good. Greed is bad. Michael Douglas was wrong in Wall Street. Greed is bad. It's a sin, but it's also entirely destructive to the game of football.
I think I would agree with you totally. And it was a great example of football being a total reflection of society, isn't it? In that small 48 hours, it gave people the opportunity to say, no, this is wrong. It'll be interesting to see how that develops, isn't it? Because it would almost look like a chess game going on, where a wrong move was made.
I interviewed on my show, on my Sunday night show, the mother of all talk shows, I interviewed one of the top agents in the country about it. He was in no doubt whatsoever that they'll come back for another try.
Right.
But such was the backlash. So huge and so virulent was the backlash that I don't think it will be tomorrow or the next day. It'll be sometime before they try it again, and they'll have to do a much better job of selling it than they did last time.
Do you think it's damaged some clubs, George? Some of the bigger clubs?
Well, I don't know about the clubs. You have to separate ownership from club. I mean, as I said to you, I'm in love with Manchester United, but I'm in hate with the Glazers, and I have been from the first day. I think it has strengthened the resolve of the fans of some clubs, not just at United, but at Arsenal, for example. The fact that Kroenke wants in excess of £2.5 billion to vacate his ownership of a club that is frankly floundering in 10th place in the Premiership. Won't make way for people like Bergkamp and Vieira and Thierry Henry and the others that are in the consortium trying to buy them. The hatred of these owners, I almost said rulers, but they are in a way rulers. The hatred of these owners is visceral, palpable, and will eventually prevail, I think.
It is, and it was another, I suppose, example of what some people were saying, wasn't it, of taking a cultural model from the States, and you were kind of evoking Gordon Gekko and then putting it into Europe with almost a very poor grasp of the roots of the game, I think.
Very much so. You could, in theory, take Real Madrid and Barcelona around the world playing exhibition games like when I was young, the Harlem Globetrotters used to do. And you might go and see it, but it's not football.
Yeah.
It's not football as we know it and want it. Football has to be about risk and reward. It has to be about promotion and relegation. Yeah. It has to be uncertain in its outcome. If the outcome of every football match were predetermined, easy to anticipate, well, nobody would lose on the pools. Everyone would win the pools, and therefore the prize would be worth nothing. It's the fact that it is perfectly possible for St. Johnstone to beat Rangers. It is perfectly possible that one team will have an off day, another an on day, that some piece of brilliance or some piece of madness will alter the outcome of a game. And that's surely why we love the game.
Yeah, I would agree totally, George. When you were speaking there, I was thinking I lived in Wimbledon for about 7-8 years, and it was at the height of the crazy gang with Vinnie Jones and that when they won the cap, and it was just incredible, really.
I was. I remember the era well, and it's that kind of rock and roll uncertainty that people love about football. An exhibition game is an exhibition game. Everyone knows that in a testimonial or an exhibition game, you play one way. In a cup final for a win bonus, you play very differently.
Yeah. Do you think, Jordan, we're going back to talking about Scotland and that industrial age, in the late 60s, 70s, and almost then kind of the deindustrialization coming out, but it's definitely in the 70s, I would say, football would have been, if not the only, but a predominant way young working class males would see themselves getting out of where they were. Do you think our society is not as hard now as it was then? And there's good things and bad things about that, I suppose.
Well, my father, God rest his soul, always argued that was the reason for the decline of Scottish football, that our people got softer, they got more prosperous and so on. But with all respect to him, that is belied by the absolutely superior football in countries much wealthier than us. In Sweden, in Denmark, in the Netherlands, perhaps most spectacularly, in Germany. These are all richer countries than ours. Their working class is not poorer than ours, but all of them are better at football than us. So I really don't think that is the reason. Although my father went to his grave insisting on it. I don't myself believe it.
I don't know if you've read the book Brilliant Orange about the revolution in Dutch football in the 60s, because I find that fascinating because it reflected, didn't it, the change in Holland or the Netherlands going from a very conservative country to more open and everything changing. And I found that fascinating. And we spoke earlier about, Shankly and socialism. And of course, Johan Cruyff was a great advocate of socialism as well, wasn't he?
Johan Cruyff was one of the greatest footballers that ever lived. My wife was born and raised and educated in the Netherlands. I go there often. Have read that book. I am a great fan of Johan Cruyff. I show my kids the videos of him and the total football that the Netherlands developed. And again, in this mythical appointment of me to form an inquiry into Scottish football, I would have what happened in the Netherlands centre stage.
Yeah.
Because here it is a European capitalist country, wealthier than us, streets less mean, not more mean than ours, and yet every boy in the Netherlands wanted to put on the orange. He wanted to play for Ajax or for the other top sides. So there's something to be learned there in how they approached the development of the game, what they invested in the development of the game, and the quality of the coaching, which obviously must have been a phenomenon.
Yeah.
But to anyone watching this who, and many, I know I've met young boys now that don't know who Johan Cruyff was. Please show your kids the genius that was Cruyff.
Yeah. Just brilliant, as you say, you used the word there, just brilliant, isn't it? Genius, and a genius way of looking at the game as well, I think.
Absolutely. The coaching, the style of football, and it didn't happen randomly, these things don't. This was the Michels and others at the top of the game in the Netherlands deciding that this is the way we're going to play. It will confound everyone. No one else will be able to do it like we can. And my goodness, it worked. If you're my age, if you're a certain age, you will never forget those Dutch teams. And by the way, the national team, having slumped a little over the last couple of years, is back now.
It's certainly an incredible. I remember hearing it was an Argentinian, I think it was the Argentinian captain speaking about, they were playing a friendly against Holland, and it was about 1970 or 71, and he said it was unbelievable because once we got a grasp of how they were playing, they would change it again with the total football. So Cruyff would be playing left back, centre forward every 10 minutes, and they would move again. And it's such an example of footballing intelligence, isn't it?
It's genius. And you've got to ask how many of our top sides could, if asked, play that way today. I suspect very few. If you see how hidebound, how system bound, how positionally bound so many of our top teams are, that kind of rotation of total football would probably be beyond most of the top players today, and that in itself tells a story.
Yeah, very much. Who have been the best players you've seen in the flesh, George?
Well, I'm going to surprise you. The best player I've seen in the flesh over, I've seen George Best in the flesh, but only when he was at Hibs and only when, he could get out of bed and appear. So the best player I've seen consistently in the flesh on the park is Charlie Cook.
Oh, yeah.
I saw Charlie Cook play for Dundee. I saw him play for Aberdeen. I saw him play not very often for Scotland. I saw him play for Chelsea quite a bit. And I would say, therefore, over a sustained period of time, the most gifted player I ever watched was Charlie Cook. That'll surprise. I'll have a few people going to the Google.
Oh, and I have good friends that do the Corver football, the ball mastery, and Charlie was, the founder of that, along with Alf Gustafsson, I think it was, and passing on.
Like the ball was tied to his feet, and also intelligent. He's still alive apparently, and living in I think in America or Australia, and still coaching.
Yeah, brilliant. But when you say Charlie Cook, one of the players of that era, similar, who I used to just love watching, was Eddie Gray for Leeds United. I thought he was similar. So exciting on the ball.
Actually, that Leeds team gets a bum rap, in my opinion. It's kind of hated, not spoken about. because of what Don Revie did subsequently, and because of ill discipline and so on, which was kind of more common in the 70s and late 60s and 70s than it is now. But a team that has Eddie Gray and Peter Lorimer has Billy Bremner and Alan Clark. I just think you travel a long way to see a team like that. And I'm just glad that I experienced them.
Have you been to Ellen Road then, George? Have you been to Ellen Road to watch matches?
Many times. And I'm a big fan of Bielsa. I think that although we can't understand what he's saying because he doesn't speak much English and we don't speak much Spanish, equally regrettable. I think you can see on the park I would say these are the closest to the Dutch model, to the total football that we were talking about earlier. A really fine side.
Yeah, I seen a quote from him yesterday. I was just using a quote, and it was just all about, wanting to attack. I'm just wanting to be on the front foot and my teams to attack all the time, because that's the best way to win the match and the best way to avoid getting defeated as well.
Exactly. So attack is the best form of defense, as someone discovered long, long ago, but amazing how many people forget it.
I know, that's true.
Tottenham Hotspur could learn it.
So what do you think of coaches like Mourinho then, who's just departed Tottenham, with his defensive style, real?
Well, I don't like that style of football. I do like Mourinho as a person. I'm quite closely associated with Portugal. I like Portuguese people and I like him. But whether he'd say if he was here, well, I had to play that low-loaded defense because I didn't have the players to do otherwise. But I think he has made a sow's ear out of a silk purse when Harry Kane and Son can only intermittently sparkle. There's something wrong with your system. And same coach, different players. Well, now it's same players, different coach.
Yeah. And I think it's just really interesting to see the development of the clubs and the coaches that are successful. I often say, I get asked, people will say, what is high performance? And I think a big tenet of high performance in any area is being able to replicate success. Not just have one success, to know what you're doing to get it. And I don't think anyone can have a go at Mourinho about not being able to replicate success.
Quite so. And he's one of the greats, will always be one of the greats. But I think if I were him now, if I were advising him now, I'd say buy yourself a football team in the lower leagues, like the United fellows have done at Salford. And you'll get more happiness, more joy out of building a team than you will managing. You're not going to get one of the top teams to hire you again, and you're too good and too great to be managing a middle of the table side.
What do you think of the Salford story, George? Because when I think of it, that's just, you can see the enjoyment the guys that own it get from doing that. But that's almost just a great example of going back to the industrial roots of the game, isn't it? In Salford and Industrial Park.
I know some of them, and I've seen the documentary, as many other fans have. It is a truly wonderful story, and I suspect it's going to have the happiest of ending. I think Salford will go all the way.
Brilliant. And just to finish with, George, coming off football slightly, because I'm kind of going to embarrass you a bit. Probably one of the best bits of oratory I've seen over the last, I don't know how long ago it was now, over 10 years ago, was when you were speaking at the US Senate and how eloquent you were there. And the question I've got for you is, 15 years. Yeah. How did you prepare for that? Or was that an off-the-cuff speech?
I absolutely did not prepare for it and had no need to. You have to remember that at that time, I was speaking about Iraq, not just every day, but every hour of every day. I had been one of the leaders of the anti-war movement. I knew the truth, I knew the case, and I knew how to defeat the case of my political enemies. So for me, it was a chance to get up close and personal. And of course, if you're telling the truth, you don't have to have a good memory. The truth is the truth and was always on my lips. But as George Bush might put it, they misunderestimated me. They had no idea whatsoever that I was going to come there in front of the world's cameras and put on a Johan Cruyff performance and make them look like chumps. They sure never asked me back.
And it's funny you say about the Cruyff performance, because one of the reasons I asked that question is because for me, that thing about the area of oratory and speaking, and it's quite similar to football, because you describe it, that, because I didn't think you could speak that eloquently without being in flow, without just being in the moment and speaking, from what your unconscious was telling you to say. And I think there's quite a lot of parallels between speaking really well and in the moment and being on the ball and seeing a pass. That's
an interesting observation. As Jack Nicklaus said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. The more you practice speaking, the better you should get as a speaker. And if you think about it, I've been giving speeches, making speeches, trying to persuade people of something for, believe it or not, 50 years. So I ought to be good at it in the same way that if you were kicking a ball up against the wall using your left foot only, if you do it enough times, you ought to be good at it. So practice makes perfect. It will not always, the words tumble sometimes better than others. If you think of, because I broadcast literally 7 days a week, every week, 7 days. So the millions and millions of words that I speak, they're not all going to be of equal quality, but they all ought to be of quality. And every now and again, you'll go on a mazy run, like Johan Cruyff, and you'll score goals that will be forever memorable. The other comparison ends.
So thanks very much for George for taking the time to speak to me today. And if anyone wants to catch up and listen to you broadcasting on your show, where's the best place to catch it?
Well, if you go on my Twitter, if you follow me on Twitter, then you'll see everything that I produce. You can follow me on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. But if you were only going to watch one thing of me, I'd watch my Sunday night Mother of All talk shows. You can watch that on my Facebook, on my YouTube, on my Twitter, on my Instagram, and on Twitch and on Telegram and so on. I think if you tune into that for the first time, you'll probably come back.
Brilliant. So that's on a Sunday night. So thanks again, George, and I really appreciate taking the time at this busy. Thank you.
Thank you.